first Friday night game of the year, and what a game it is. Wales v France in Cardiff in the Millennium Stadium, or the Principality Stadium as it is now. Always a cracking game between these two, and now a lot on the line. There's pride to play for if you're a Welshman. There's definitely a Grandslam and more to be playing for if you're away, if you're in France colours as well. But this game is going to be cracking. As I mentioned, it's Friday evening, 8 o'clock kickoff, so evening game, refed by Matthew Carley, an Englishman there with the whistle, and Jaco Piper, Andrea Piardi are the ARs on the touchline, with Tom Foley in as the TMO for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a big game, this one. I always love the Friday night games. They give that kind of that just prime time feel to them, the late night vibes, especially now that they haven't been able to close the roof off, but they're going to get the natural darkness to be able to put on a bit of a light show. It's just going to be a different kind of atmosphere out in Cardiff.
The crowd is always like into it from before the opening whistle when it's 8 o'clock on a Friday evening in Cardiff anyway, you know.
It's just different. It's just going to hit different. This game is going to be huge. From Wales's point of view, obviously they're out of this competition. But if they do end the season with back-to-back wins, they can come away with a lot of momentum here. Obviously they just had that terrible performance at the start of the year against Ireland, but since then bounced back brilliantly against Scotland and showed all of their kind of wily quality, even in the absence of all of the injured players that they've had, to nearly pip England and to outscore them 3-1 in that game. There's a lot to build from, and if they can come here, like obviously they've Italy the last weekend, but this is a home game in front of their home fans, and it will change the whole complexion of their season. If they get a win in this one, all of a sudden things are looking up for Wales. People were writing them off pre-tournament, and yet again they'd be right back in the swing of it, even though their title defence did fall by the wayside last week in Twickenham. A win here does turn it all around for them, and they need a bit of momentum because they're touring South Africa in the summer, and that starts to home into view as soon as the Six Nations fades away.
Very true. They could do with a nice home win and a chance to do France dirty, which they kind of returned the favour from last year as well in terms of just scuppering Grand Slam hopes. That would be a nice feather in the Welsh cap if they can manage it. Just a bit of colour on the fixture itself. France and Wales have actually played each other at rugby union since 1908, so a while now, a long and storied history. A total of 101 matches have been played between them. Wales have won 51, France 47, and 3 of them have finished as draws. That's kind of skewed by the early kind of fixtures, because the first, I think, 18 of 19 matches in the Five Nations Championship were Wales wins before France were actually expelled from the tournament in 31 for a wee while and then came back in. But since they rejoined the competition, they've won 46 of the 82 matches played, so it's been very tight throughout their history, really. And the more recent record is kind of the more telling one. I mean, like the teams have also met a few times at outside of the Six Nations. In the World Cup they've met twice. Both have dumped each other out at both stages, so they're just trading blows. The most recent World Cup meeting was Wales dumping France out in Japan, which was in the quarter-final there, and that was obviously a tight and contentious game. But since that date, they've played 3 times in the Six Nations, with France winning all 3, including, as we were alluding to last year, kind of a late Bruce Doolan moment to deny Wales the Grand Slam. So that's very fresh in Welsh memories as well.
It is, no doubt it is. They've been mentioning it in their build up to the game in camp this week. It has been on their minds. It was a heartbreaker for them. It took the slam away. They were well in that game, but so they will be confident or at least determined to come back out with a bang and take it to this French team. But France, meanwhile, are not playing for pride. They're not playing to ready themselves for a summer tour. They're playing for silverware. They are the form side in test footy right now, looking absolutely brilliant. They're just 2 games away from doing what they haven't done yet and adding silverware to it, ending a 12-year drought. They're as close, it seemingly, as they've been in that time, really, to going and claiming that crown. And I think they'll be absolutely buzzing to get after this Welsh team that's already slipped up in 2 games and to set up that showdown in Paris against the English to finally right that wrong. I mean, this is all about business for France.
It is, they need to arrive to the pitch and go out there and do a job. And I'm sure guys like Sean Edwards returning to Cardiff as well, he'll be determined that they're all marching to his tune and arriving without without a hint of kind of, jaded energy or anything like that. They want to be starting ferociously, which to be fair, they have made a habit of in this tournament already. They've been starting really all guns blazing, where Wales have been a bit sluggish, so they'll be hopeful to hit the ground running in Cardiff as well. Here we are just going to look ahead to both sides as we do, and look at the winning conditions for both, and we're going to start with the home team, the hosts, which is Wales. And what do they need to do to try and unstick this French juggernaut that has so far in the tournament proven too much for all comers, and starved of the momentum that Wales normally like to carry into crunch fixtures like this. It's going to have to come from somewhere else, but primarily, you're looking at that pack and thinking, what can they do? Do they have the kind of courage and the quality needed to contain that massive group of Frenchmen and the ones that are on the bench to come off for France as well for the full 80 minutes? It's going to have to start there in that contact zone, and I think they are aware of it. We are shooting this on a Tuesday now, and we've got some squad updates. There have been guys coming in. Navidi has come in as well. Obviously Faletau was back last week. They're obviously concerned with some of their just breakdown return, I would imagine, over the last 3 games.
I mean, it has been rough. Some new faces aren't going to hurt at all. I mean, as far as their squad is concerned, most of it is fairly settled. There's a little bit of a quibble about potentially the 13 shirt. Watkins' form is great, but his fitness that they're unsure of. Might be Jay Davis, might be Watkin. Doesn't change the system too much either way. It will be Tompkins in 12. He's been so good. And then on the edge, there's been a bit of a debate, at least amongst Welsh rugby fandom, between Cuthbert and Louis Rees-Zammit, who made a real claim for it, scoring a worldie of a try for Gloucester at the weekend.
He did. It's kind of a philosophical difference, those two wingers.
Yeah, indeed. I think personally I'd be going for the young buck out of those, but they'll probably stick with Cuthbert. But the real debate, the real intrigue is in that back row. There've been all kinds of thoughts about, I think you're thinking Faletau has the 8 shirt, but then it could be Jack Morgan and Tane Basham, as it has been. Navidi could come into the team. They were talking about Seb Davis potentially coming in. They have dumped Ellis Jenkins out of the squad after his great November last year. It just hasn't happened for him. But it'll be interesting to see who they go for either way. There's kind of a horses for courses element. The guys that are picked have to deliver on a level that they probably haven't all tournament.
That's kind of it, is that regardless of the personnel that they do end up going for, the job has to be done, and it hasn't really been thus far. That's been the main concern, and that's why you're looking at guys like Beard, like Wyn Jones, that are pretty much stalwarts in that pack, and they're going to need to deliver a performance that's going to generate good ball for them to work with, because they've started slow against the top teams in every single matchup they've had, and they've really struggled to retain their own ball for large periods as well against these dogged kind of defences that are going after them at the breakdown. And France are no different. This France team have been tenacious, more so even than England or Ireland, who did kind of have their way with Wales at that breakdown area.
You look at that 9-0 deficit that they managed to accrue against England very expensively in the opening stanzas of that game. They were all offensive penalties in their own half, and there were consequences. Some of them were just on setting up a kick. Those are really sloppy. They've got to mind the breakdown in that sense. France are going to be hitting those rucks. They've got to be well aware of it. They've got to resource those rucks. And really, when you're talking about working this offense, there is some encouraging stuff there. There's some great talent. We know what they can do when they get it to the edges. Josh Adams, be it Cuthbert or Rees-Zammit, there's lethal offensive footy to be had there. Likewise in Liam Williams, Tompkins and Bigger between them are going to be the real fulcrums of trying to get them wide, sharp passing, trying to get outside Fiku and really expose them there. But they do, in my view, need to cap it at 3 phases, especially when it's in their own half, and at times not even 3 phases. They have to be very, very mindful of protecting the ball, deceptive about where they're going with it, such that they can resource the rucks and clear them quickly. And then if it's not there in a few phases time, you're looking to kick, you're looking to put the ball up in the air. You saw that Scotland had some purchase the more that game went on against Jaminet in those areas. They'll
fancy that matchup in the aerial game. Liam Williams and Jaminet should be good for Wales.
Is different from everyone else's in that it's not necessarily been great off set pieces, and that's not really how they unpick teams, and they're not really a well structured, coordinated offense that's going to unpick you in that way, generate a line break and do things that way. Most of their scores come from these kind of chaos scenarios where you've generated a penalty, it's a quick tap, there's a broken defence, and you just kind of see an opening or a chance to score.
Sure.
And so actually generating those chaos opportunities off the big box kicks could be a real in for them.
Yeah.
And that's probably something that they're going to look at. You generate a chaos ball, you go for it again, you get Tompkins on the ball, you work it for a couple of phases. As soon as the French defence is set, we're kicking again.
Yeah.
We're going to pin you back, we're going to take you on in the aerial game, which is our best matchup against you. Scotland tried the same thing, and when you kick loosely, it's very, very dangerous. You've got to kick accurately. But for me, that is their best in offence. They are a kick first kind of team. They've got Bigger and Liam Williams in the team as their fulcrum. That's kind of where they have to go, I think those, to get up the field.
Yeah, true. I think it'll be more contestable than what Scotland are tending to do in terms of kind of kicking for grass more so slightly different way of applying the kicking game. But definitely, those ideal matchups are things like Liam Williams in the air versus Jaminet or someone, and hopefully you can get purchase in that regard. They will need to access the wide channels through the passing game as well. It can't all be kicking, and to be honest, if they are repelled to the point where they kind of are out of ideas and just kicking non-proactively, that's not a good sign. It's a subtle distinction with difference, but they will ultimately, like you saw during that comeback in the second half against England, that they do have the capability to go through, find some great scores when they need them, and they just need to start with a bit more endeavour. Like, you can't leave Adams as starved of good ball as he has been over really the past few games, particularly the Ireland game, but also even in that first half in England. He was a frustrated man on the wing, not really getting any service, and I think Tompkins is, you were right to highlight, kind of a key man for that, because with that Sean Edwards defence around the ruck and their ferocity in the ruck, sometimes it might be one or two pass plays that are needed to try and find a bit of purchase out there. That does engage the Fiku defence, so that's why you got
to bring depth like Ireland did in Paris in the second half. They adjusted by bringing a lot more depth to deal with that line speed. Wales at the moment aren't playing slickly enough to deal with that line speed, and they don't have the ferocity and the carry to really manage that. So you are talking about, like, obviously the enforced 20 metre gap at a line out or 10 metre gap at a scrum is a good opportunity to do that. But in the main, I think you're talking about holding your depth, trying to get those wide passes. But even then, the French drift is so good that I think you are looking ultimately at attacking kicks, using your midfield offense to work the pendulum, and then trying to be clinical when you're in the red zone. And for me, most of their offense is going to happen in the red zone, with Thomas Williams driving that hard tempo, and he had that great pass to Josh Adams, flashing it past a number of players, just trying to look to space, accessing those areas, stretching the French, hopefully forcing a penalty, quick tapping the penalty, or finding a way to score. But I think most of the management and most of Wales is in this game is just to kind of manage that midfield game such that they generate more red zone opportunities than the French. Yeah,
that's true, and that leads into discipline as a key point as well, because they've been on the wrong side of the penalty count in most of the crunch times, or the crunch minutes of these top tier matchups against these kind of really high level teams this year. They haven't really been able to deal with the pressure, deal with the physicality, and then that's manifested itself in some sloppy penalties. You were highlighting ones on their own offensive breakdown to give England cheap scores, but it's been happening kind of. They've been leaking penalties even as far back as autumn as well with the All Black game. They were just a little sloppy in certain areas, and they can't afford to be here. You want to limit cheap French entrances, because this France side are actually very, very good, very proficient at striking off set pieces just into the red zone, or just in the middle third, verging on the red zone. So you've got to kind of be mature enough to end up on the right side of that. You will have to soak some pressure, but try and keep your P's and Q's in order. It's such a crucial thing for the small margins are so small in these kinds of matchups that it can snowball very, very quickly on you. And for Wales, they definitely need to keep themselves in it by getting just on the right side of that referee in that regard. And then on the defensive side as well, dealing with what is a frightening France juggernaut of an offensive unit coming their way. Big tests for guys like Tompkins in that Fiku role of shutting down the outside.
Yeah, they've had both centres kind of working as 13s on either edge, and to be fair to them, they've held their width really, really well throughout this championship. It was a real problem for England, who were kind of inherently lateral in what they were trying to do the other week. And Wales held their own against it. They that defence didn't give up a try. In that whole game, despite giving way in territory and in possession. They held their own around the 22 very well, and I think they should be confident about their ability to shut down the outside, maintain their width, that element of the defence is in good shape.
Yeah.
I think the big question really is what happens on the inside when Dupont and his big runners are trying to come at you around the corner, around the corner. That is where you're talking about your guys like your Wyn Joneses and your Adam Beards. But the whole tight five, Rowlands, who's the big hefty unit who's in there, Seb Davies might be coming into the team. These guys need to make huge tackles and huge plays, like just in moments, getting hands in, being like obviously being legal as you say, but being just spoily enough that you can slow it down, keep it slow, and being up to the physical fight of being able to stand up to Antonio
comes around the corner with Willems and
then
latching onto him, like that's a hell of a lot of unit coming through.
What did Wales do? What did how did Edwards deal with that when Wales were an outsized team? They did low chop and jackals. They caught teams, and they'd catch teams if the latcher goes off his feet. Those kind of things, those kind of wily defensive plays where you think they're going to be outmatched, but they're playing with enough hustle. They know what to do. They make the right. They tackle in the right ways where you're getting low, chopping the runner down, getting hands in, slowing the ball up as best as you can, and frustrating the French. Maybe generating a couple of defensive penalties. That's where your heroic plays are going to come in from whoever is in the team, Faletau, or Wyn Jones, or one of these guys
will have
to make it a play.
Yeah, and like you're right in saying, just get a turnover penalty if it's going, but get the hands in first and foremost. Just make France go through rucks, go through phases, rather than getting the ball out.
Make it messy for
Make it
Dupont,
messy, like a chop and jackal approach is perfect, because you chop them down, and then the person who's nearest get in there and make it a ruck as soon as you can. Don't allow Dupont to just kind of willy-nilly get it out, or allow the forwards to be like flicking it out of the contact zone and discombobulating your defence by doing that, because France are very dangerous. It's like, even if you're not going to get the penalty, be satisfied that you've created the ruck, and then stay legal within that. Don't go for it if it's not going to go. Don't go in for a jackal if you can see that the tackler's still there and going to get pinned for not rolling. Be a bit more savvy and a bit more knowledgeable that like the first job is you've got him to deck, you've created a ruck, that's grand. Now you're giving your defence time. If you're still in there, be contested, be competitive, but keep your feet. Don't flop over and do something silly and kill it, because it's like all that good work can be undone, and like 6 or 7 really good defensive phases or defensive sets can be undone by just a cheap pen. So mind your P's and Q's in that area. But yeah, crucial that they are up to that fight in that tight area around the ruck where Dupont is going to be prowling, and all those French forwards are going to be rolling, and you got to be rolling your sleeves up and using that energy from the crowd. Friday night, Cardiff, loud noise, every big hit that you put in proactively is going to be welcomed with like a massive cheer, and you can feed off that and try and make the French shrink in that context.
The French are carrying a lot of momentum at the moment. They're nigh on impossible to stop, and they're starting games at this blistering speed, full of confidence. If Wales can generate, like, it's just 1 or 2 big plays early doors, winning a high ball, going down the field, if it's a defensive set they're facing, slowing them down, generating one big jackal or one big chop, or forcing one big offensive penalty by being sly and going in for a jackal and then backing off and the guy comes flying in, you get a penalty that way. All of those kind of little hustles that you can do to repel what is a formidable offense, then the game changes. If France don't get their quick start, all of a sudden, instead of carrying all that momentum, it might dawn on them that they're actually under a lot of pressure as well, and that if they blow this situation from where they are here in terms of actually winning the tournament, having beaten Ireland, having gone and won in Murrayfield after Scotland were a bugbear for them for so long, a chance to bring it back to Paris for a Grand Slam. Like, they have to win this game, and the longer it goes on that Wales are clinging on like they so effectively do, the more that pressure might end up starting to mount on the French. So it's just about staying in the game, making big plays early doors, and getting to kind of half time into kind of an even game, generating that kind of tit for tat infield, midfield kicking game, ironing out a couple of penalties and taking 1 or 2 tries in key moments. That is the Welsh picture.
It is definitely the Welsh picture. It's a few key things have to go right. You know, the set piece, they're under pressure, and by my estimation, in both set pieces, they're going to be under pressure. But they're going to need to be sharp and be accurate.
They have a good line out in scrum. They do.
They should fancy trying to contest the French ball, I think, because the French do have a good maul when they get it going, but they don't go to it as often, and they aren't quite as lethal off their maul drive as they are just off the top, clean attacks from the middle third. So I think guys like Beard should be trying to make it a bit more messy than that, try and make it not as clean.
And they'll presumably have had words with the ref about encroachment and all that kind of stuff, because as much as their line out seemed to malfunction last week, they do have a good line out. They just weren't wily enough to be aware of what England were at. And I think the presence of Alan Wynne-Jones, even just in an off-field capacity back in there,
coach,
is likely to give them some good line-out juju going into this one as well.
Sure. But from that is the Welsh picture, and geez, a lot of things do need to go right, but it is in Cardiff, so you never write the Welsh off in Cardiff at all, and on a Friday night it could go their way. But from France's point of view, they do not want any of those things to go. They want to keep their momentum rolling on through this. It's a useful asset in the Six Nations, is just having a bit of momentum and a bit of a win streak to carry in. They're going to use it to try and conquer Cardiff and try and silence the crowd, and if they can carry on starting the way they have in all three of the games as well, just hit the ground running with some really blistering offensive sequences and try and be as dynamic and physical as they are, and use their full kind of attributal advantages that they do have in the pack, throw their weight around from very early on, do so in an accurate fashion, then they should be able to try and edge this one from the early one, and from the early off kind of diffuse the crowd factor by getting on top and then calm themselves down from that pressure that you were alluding to.
Absolutely. As far as the squad is concerned, it is a very settled squad. They have, they're unlikely really to waver from what they've been doing in anywhere. I would
very
care to venture.
If
there's
mentality.
one or two changes, I'd be surprised. The only thing is that it's Tuesday evening as we're shooting this, even though you guys are seeing it later in the week. That's just the way it falls this week for us. So we don't actually have the teams. And there was a report where we are now that Dupont picked up a knock in training and stayed out of training, took a blow to his bicep and was icing it, but we're not sure at this stage if it's serious. It appears not. It appears that he'll probably play, but as it was in the Tuesday session, it was Luku who slipped into scrum half, and they got Kuyu on the bench as well. So as much as missing a Dupont factor is big, if that is the way it goes out, it doesn't actually change the way they play too much, where they are still trying to generate that rhythm and tempo.
And the quality of the other halfbacks behind is very, very good anyway. It'll just become less of a focal point because they don't have a Dupont if they don't. But I'd imagine, as it looks now, I would imagine they will be going with Dupont. Even if he's stitched together, they'll try and throw him out because he is that talismanic for him. But yeah, certainly in terms of their form, their attack looks very, very sharp. At the minute, that is with Dupont, but also just in general, the running lines off Fiku out wider, off Jamine out even wider is just brilliant. The wingers look very dialed in to grabbing scores when they're there, and they showed that in Murrayfield last week or a couple of weeks ago.
Well, they had a bunch of different types of tries. They had a lovely set piece move with Fiku and Dante putting it through the hands to open up the space out wide, turn Chris Harris inside and out. Then they had a great kick return try, and they also had plenty of turnover tries towards the tail end of the game as well. But I think early, like you were looking at the Welsh kicking game that we were talking about from a Welsh point of view, like what Dupont did at the start of that game, a loose kick from Finn Russell, it didn't even look that loose, it looked like a good pressure kick that was just by sheer quality and explosiveness turned into a catastrophic play, and it was France just changing the name of the game with their sheer ability, and that was like
transition play will be so key, because they know that a similar, if slightly different kicking challenge and aerial challenge will be presented by Wales if they can punish them with plays like that Dupont play, or plays like the Jamine 50-22 from that game as well, that yielded another set piece strike move that yielded another score. That's exactly the way to punish the Welsh game plan for being a little bit, a little bit too patient, a little bit kind of too willing to kick the ball to France, which it can and is a very dangerous policy, and France will be determined to illustrate why in Cardiff.
If they can dominate the backfield and the air, they will win this game. I have no doubt. Like, that is Wales' number one in. They do have a lot of quality in Liam Williams. They do have some good kicks. They probably will take one or two of them, but it's a question of just being sharp enough to completely punish those kicks that are loose, to find your broken field runners, to be like they have such good offensive instincts. It's just a question of folding around at speed to support the player, to open up spaces and channels once you're on kick return. And then for like if you're tackled to the ground after first phase, like sometimes Dupont will just take off, you got to support him then, but you're generally trying to create a blistering speed towards the open field in 2 or 3 phases if you can off kick return, to try and catch the Welsh and really just sort of open that defence up before it's allowed to set into any kind of structured shape.
That's it. They're so expert, and they really do hold their depth very, very well, and pick sumptuous lines off one another when the field is broken like that. So yeah, if they can create those kinds of opportunities for themselves, they'll be delighted. But primarily as well, just in the middle third, they'll stay calm. Edwards will be determined on that they should be calm and proactive on the defensive side as well. Like their offense is great, but the defense is probably what will yield them the opportunities to go through that and the opportunities to kick the corner and get their line out, which has been very good. Woki has been a revelation this season in their line out and just securing their ball and making a mess of other people's ball. And then the scrum is just so mighty with Antonio and Willemse on one side. Like, they know they have attributes in those set pieces, so they should be confident of, you know, setting up little kicks down to Wales for them in their own territory, pin them back a little bit, and trust that defensive wall, because Wales have struggled offensively by and large against these top level ones, and they'll just look to present that similar picture and be very ferocious in contact and feed off those mistakes. If they can pressure the halfbacks proactively on the defence, then suddenly their kicking game will be a bit less proactive and a bit more reactive, and that's where you'll get those chances to counter that they love so well.
Absolutely. And when they are setting up those offensive sets in the Welsh half, we talked about it a little bit when we were talking about Wales. Wales' defence very impressive, particularly around their own 22 and their own red zone.
True.
Maintaining the width of the field. So you're looking at the kind of tries that France have scored in the red zone, where they're flashing it wide this way and that. Those tries might not be as there for them. Wales might be prepared. You know, you do back the defensive instincts. I know Harris was turned inside out, so they always have the quality to do it if they have a good scheme up and a good plan.
Sure. Yeah.
But actually, the best in for them could be that kind of
just
around the ruck.
Like
power game. Like even little tip-ons. Like if Wales are overloading, you've got you were saying like Antonio and Willemse around the corner, just a little tip on to an Aldrich, leaves him one-on-one against a static defender.
Yeah, sure. They scored one like that last week as well. Just roll the contact, get the hands free, and then crash over around the ruck. It does nothing fancy, but the matchups are very good for France in that tight five area.
And you know Dupont is, or like even if it is Luku, but Dupont obviously, hopefully and primarily, is going to generate that blistering tempo. He's got a great read and a great feel around the rucks. Even if there's a Welsh jackler in there, he's going to wrestle the ball off him. You can disjoint that defence with your power runners around the middle and really just be relentless. It wouldn't surprise me to see France go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 phases all around the ruck, all going forward, and really just force Wales to come in before they go
then
wide.
Maybe a Pinot try for no effort at all. He'll just be hanging out there and glide in. But
surely it starts down the middle first. That's where Wales are soft, and Ireland kind of exposed that as well with their own forward interplay.
This is it. They'll be expecting, like, Wales will probably chop them a few times and maybe jackal a few times. They'll need to be there not just to run optimistic offload lines, but resource their own rucks a few times. But they'll, if they can win 2 or 3 contacts in a row and then get the hands free through it, that'll be the way through this defence. That is pretty tight and does stay connected as well. So they'll have to earn that right to go wide, as you said.
Physical, It is physical and speedy. Like Dupont will get the tempo going, then you've just got to get those physical carries going. And then just a little bit of deception, just one little tip on or one little inside ball that'll catch them off guard, and that could be enough with the quality they have.
The trappings of that system are to be a little bit off on the tempo, be maybe a little bit slow because you're determined to go around the corner and impose yourself physically like that. Don't allow it to be that slow. Don't allow them to get kind of isolated around the corner as well when you're doing that. Just be bring that tempo, be ferocious onto the line like that.
They have been all year. They have been that dialed in, focused, quick to fold entity so far this year, and it's just more of the same, really.
That's it. Keep the foot on the accelerator from a France point of view on both sides of the pill as well, because they will really fancy the matchups, particularly across the back line, but also in the forwards, just in terms of if the forwards can win their contacts when they're defending them and when they're rolling over them, then the backs will probably follow suit. We saw that with the Ireland game was a good example of that, like little Villiers manhandling Hugo Keenan kind of thing, Fiku manhandling anyone he shoots up on, and balling all tackles on Tompkins will go a long way to unsticking whatever it is Wales are plotting to do with the ball and forcing kind of back foot kicks from them that are much more easy to defuse if you're a Jaminet. It's just it all coalesces if they do arrive to that pitch and be able to put down that physical marker that to be honest the team sheets would suggest that France do have that edge there. It's about staying calm.
They've been incredible so far. They've been incredible. The way that they've been able to, particularly on the defensive end, just make absolute shite of the opposition ruck.
That's true. It's so there for them. That Sean Edwards, as he was deliciously welcoming a much touted Irish offense to Paris to kind of do a job on them, so too will he not as much as a touted one, but just looking at the way Wales have been resourcing their own rucks with the pill, even ones that are like setting up kicks, as you were saying. That should be such fodder for an Edwards defence to just get after, and such easy motivation for him to pin to the notice board and get them kind of determined to make an absolute mess of a nightmare of retaining possession for Wales and force them to kick it to you.
They have been exceptional this year. Like, we're not lying when we say they're the form side in World Rugby now. I mean, the Springboks and the All Blacks will have their form coming in later in the year, and obviously it's all building up to the World Cup next year. True. But they look incredible right now on the offense, on the defense, the size of them, the skill of them. They're playing with ferocity and focus. If they bring the same energy and the same focus that they have brought,
just the same quality,
they will win this game. I don't doubt that. The only problem is if they're just, like, if they start fast but then all of a sudden they're kind of kicking a few 3-pointers and then they switch off, then it's like if they take, for example, a 6 or a 9-0 lead and they think it's going easy and then just cough up a penalty, like a little moment where they just fall asleep and aren't quite as focused as they have been. We haven't really seen many glimpses of it so far in this year's competition. Maybe a little wobble in the third quarter against a very good Irish team.
Sure.
But outside of that, like, they've been they've been brilliant, really. And even in that Ireland team, they rallied really well towards the end and nearly took a try to take the losing bonus point away from Ireland. But it's just in those moments, like, if those old French issues creep back, where, like, all of a sudden this is a game, they don't have that bad a record against Wales. They're like, if they take an early lead and it just feels easy, if they fall away, if they start to get sloppy, if the momentum starts to go against them, if they fall asleep and give up a cheap try, and then all of a sudden it is a narrow game in the second half, then we might see a picture that we haven't had to see from France this year, which is them in a close game that they have to win, when they might have to dig it out. That kind of pressure,
that tangible pressure that can obviously skew the picture a little bit from what you're reading before the game in the cold, sterile environment of before the game. Looking at it, it doesn't make sense. But then when you're in the fire,
if they don't take tries, if they go to the red zone and Wales give up a penalty and they happily take a 3-pointer here, a 3-pointer here, a 3-pointer there, then give up one, then all of a sudden Wales strike before the half, and then it's 10-9 to the opposition, even though France have been the best side. We've seen that kind of thing happen before.
That has played out in this fixture before, with both sides doing it to each other, to be honest. They both have similar habits, so it could go that way. But I don't know, how do you figure this one going?
That's what I was saying. Like, on paper it is all France. The only question is, do they get put into that fire, into that position where they haven't been all year, where they're in the second half and they have to dig it out.
To be frank as well, where Wales haven't put anyone all year either.
No, indeed. And
bar maybe Scotland.
Where I was going with this was to say that I don't think that'll happen. I think it's a fair question to put to the French team, because they haven't actually been in that situation where they have to come back from behind and the pressure's on them, and maybe we'll see something new from them.
Probably one that they want to answer for themselves, for their own sake as well, with the macro of 2023 World Cups as well. They want these kinds of tests.
I mean, they've just beaten Ireland and Scotland. They are Ireland at home, a very, very good Ireland team, one of the form sides in the world themselves, who did counterpunch really well.
Gave them a right game. It's always good to come out at the right end of a result in a game of that quality. It stands you in good stead.
And then to go to Murrayfield and just be merciless like they were. So far I haven't seen a glimpse of it. I haven't seen a glimpse of that French kind of laissez-faire, falling away, losing focus. It hasn't been there. They have been very focused, very well coached, determined, brilliant. That's all we've seen from them this year. That's all we have to go on. And so if they do rock up in that vein, they will win this game. I don't doubt it. So I am picking France to win this one. Perhaps win it big, because they've been so good. They haven't missed a beat so far.
To be honest, I suspect you're right. But for colour's sake, I'm going to say that Wales managed to scupper them, or that France managed to scupper themselves. But somehow that Cardiff juju might do well for them. It's kind of aligned with my Irish Grandslam predictions that don't work out. I would like for Wales to do the job on them in Cardiff and don't leave the suspense to the final weekend. But no, I'll say that Wales do arrive to the pitch this time and actually start well for once, and France maybe don't start quite so well for once, and we'll see that game play out. To be honest, like it's France might be able to dig that one out too. I do think that France are the better side of the two, but I think there's something to this home advantage.
They've got that ace in the whole 6-2 split to bring in well against a Welsh pack that very much hasn't been doing the business. So I'm
going to say a marginal 1 point win for Wales, 1 or 2 point win for Wales, and a very head scratching showing from the French. That's what I'm going to say. Shoes on the other foot from last year.
It's happened every year so far. So for France, they haven't been able to finish it yet, but this team does look better than any I've seen since that 2010 year. So I'm going France. He's going Wales. Who do you got? Let us know in the comments down below. And we'll enjoy this one. It's going to be a class Friday night show in Cardiff.
Absolutely. Thank you for tuning in to the Overlap Rugby podcast. If If you enjoyed what you hear, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below as well. We enjoy hearing your opinions too. Thank you.